Hello, everybody. We're the Wildlife Wire, and we are back with our third episode of Wildlife Biologists ranking the animals of Planet Zoo. To introduce ourselves, I will start off. My name is Dominic Noche. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in wildlife biology from the University of Montana, and I've been mostly working on different projects with medium-sized and large carnivores, currently working with bobcats in New York right now.
My name is Lane Arthur. I graduated from the University of Montana as well with a degree in wildlife biology and parks, tourism, and recreation management. Uh, I'm currently working with the Forest Service studying raptor species in the Black Hills.
I'm Justin Ruby, also graduated from the University of Montana studying wildlife biology. I currently do a lot of wildlife education work, and in the past, I have worked a lot with as a research technician, writing scientific manuscripts and dealing with data sheets.
All right, so here we are with our next episode, which is on the Eurasian lynx. So this is our second cat species that we're covering, and I think first off, this is another one of the cats that I think they did a really good job with. They definitely improved with a lot of the DLC animals, I would say. And the Eurasian lynx is probably one of my favorite looking cat species that we have in the game. They just really capture a lot of the markings and the ear tufts. And I think even though Frontier has their kind of style with making the eyes and the faces a little bit cartoony, it's not as drastic in the lynx. And I think it does look a bit more normal with that piercing gaze that you have in cats. And the Amur leopard does have that as well, but the lynx, I think, really exemplifies it a little bit better too.
Yeah, and I think they also got the color really good on the Eurasian lynx. They really kind of nailed the reddish color.
Yeah, and they do have quite a bit of coat color variety, but the
Yeah.
amount that you see on the spots and the size of the paws, and I think part of that really comes from the fact that people kind of just refer to lynx as a whole, but lynx is not a species, it's a genus. So that would be, referring to lynx as a species is like referring to lions, tigers, leopards, and jaguars all as one species because they're all in the same genus of Panthera. And we do actually have 4 different lynx species. And the Eurasian lynx is, of course, the largest, but you also have the Canada lynx in northern North America and the bobcat in a bit more like central North America, which, as I've said, I'm working with bobcats right now. I've also worked with Canada lynx in the past. So I've worked with 2 of the 4 lynx species alive today. And then finally, probably the least known is the Iberian lynx, which is restricted to Spain and Portugal right now. It's critically endangered. It's one of the most endangered cat species on the planet right now. But the Eurasian lynx is pretty unique in the sense of being a lynx in that it is being the largest lynx. It can take pretty atypical prey. And I think that's what makes it quite famous and in some places quite controversial to have around compared to a lot of the smaller lynx species that tend to fly under the radar in terms of public concern. So to kind of start off with the Eurasian lynx, another fun thing about it is that its scientific name is very easy to remember. It's lynx lynx. It's the same word for the genus name and the specific epithet. And that's due to the fact that it was the first lynx species recognized by Western science, and sometimes they get lazy and do things like that. But Eurasian lynx, they occur throughout most of Europe and into a great deal of Asia, so down into Southwest Asia, into the Caucasus Mountains along the European border there, and into the mountains within Central Asia, so even parts of northern India, Nepal, Western China, Mongolia, and up through Russia into the Far East, which we covered in our Amur leopard video. So this is a species that is a very big generalist. It has a very large range, but it does prefer a lot of these sorts of mixed forest with thick trees, which Justin has prepared for us here with this exhibit that probably looks very similar to the Amur leopard video, and that's because it is the Amur leopard exhibit with some slight edits. But again, it's a very broad range, so they're living in very different forests with very different trees across that whole Eurasian greater continent. And with that means that they have to eat a lot of different prey. So these guys are famous because they're very often seen as deer hunters compared to things like bobcat and Canada lynx and Iberian lynx, where Canada lynx and Iberian lynx in particular, we see them as lagomorph specialists, rabbit and hare specialists. That's almost all they eat. Bobcats are a bit more generalist, but they still hunt a lot of rabbits and hares as well. Whereas in a lot of parts of Europe, the primary prey for Eurasian lynx is European roe deer. And that sounds really impressive, especially for a lot of people in America, because you're picturing a deer similar to our white-tailed deer. And the roe deer is smaller than the white-tailed deer, so it's not as crazy as you probably picture in your mind. However, they are able to tackle some larger species of deer like the fallow deer and even some adult females of red deer, which is the larger deer species that's common across Europe, as well as some of the other ungulates. Like they'll go after young wild boar, chamois, which is a goat relative that's found in the European mountains. Those are all species that Eurasian lynx will commonly hunt, but they'll also hunt a lot of small animals, as and just like the other lynx. And as we said with the Amur leopard, smaller carnivores that they bump into, they're on the menu as well. So things like foxes, badgers, small weasels, golden jackals, they're all prime picking for being killed by a lynx, not just as an opportunistic meal, but even to eliminate a lot of competition that they may share when they're hunting those smaller prey species. So that's what we see a lot in Europe. And Eurasian lynx are definitely much better studied in Europe than they are in Asia. But there are some prey studies that we've seen from Asia, and it's a very different picture. The Eurasian lynx there are mostly hunting small mammals. They're very reliant on rabbits and hares, just like all the other lynx species. And that seems to be primarily what they're focusing on. Even if there's ungulates in the area and the ungulate populations are doing well, these Asian lynx seem to be preferring smaller animals. And while there isn't a lot of data on it, my suspicion is the reason we see this great shift in prey preference is probably due to the presence of other cats. So in Western and Central Europe, Eurasian lynx is top cat. It's been top cat for a pretty long while. And in Asia, even in the Caucasus, you still have leopards. It also used to have lions and tigers. So the Caucasus used to be a hotbed for big cats, but tigers and lions have gone extinct in that area. And even into parts of Central Asia, you still have some leopards, you have snow leopards, and then getting up into the Far East, you have tigers. And so all those larger cats are going to be enforcing that same top-down pressure that a lynx would be enforcing on things like foxes and weasels and badgers and things like that. So to avoid competing with these bigger cats, a lynx is more likely to go after smaller prey. And that's what we call niche partitioning, where you don't want to be competing with somebody else because it increases the chances that you're going to get into a fight, which you're trying to avoid as a predator. You don't want to get hurt. So going after smaller prey that the bigger predators aren't really targeting. Also, killing small prey can have its advantages in that you can eat it quickly. You don't have to sit there and guard a carcass. So that's what we'll see in the European lynxes, is that when they kill deer, they're sitting there and they're guarding it from smaller carnivores for a couple of days while they finish feasting on it. Whereas with the smaller prey, you can eat it quickly, you can get out of the way. It's not going to attract that much attention, which is really important. And it shows the adaptability that the Eurasian lynx really possesses for having this wide geographic range, and it really helps them survive. But they do have some other competitors that are pretty consistent. So brown bears are a very big scavenger, especially in the European populations where they're hunting these ungulates. Brown bears will come in and monopolize kills. And another scavenger that they have to deal with in some of the northern regions is wolverine. Wolverine will come and scavenge on about 50 to 60% of lynx kills. Usually in these parts, it's the Scandinavian countries, so the lynx are primarily killing things like roe deer and even reindeer, and wolverines will come in on those. There has been a lot with wolverines getting kind of overhyped as this Napoleon monster of the carnivore kingdom. And one of the things that people like to talk about is that, oh, they push lynx off of kills, they kill lynx. And from doing my research, and we have all of our citations and sources in the description in case anybody wants to check them out. But from what I could find, there's only been one truly confirmed instance of a wolverine killing a lynx, and it was a young male. So it does happen, but it's not happening nearly to the degree that a lot of people are saying, at least in terms of what I could find from reliable sources. And then the other big one is wolves. Wolves are usually proclaimed as something that push lynx around quite a lot, and I think that one's a lot more believable. Wolves are quite a bit bigger than even Eurasian lynx. They live in packs, so they have numerical advantage as well. But in Poland, they found that wolves and lynx were able to partition together quite well. And so you had lynx mostly sticking to thicker cover and hunting the smaller roe deer, while the wolves were using more open areas, the open trails and the fields, and they were mostly hunting red deer. And they were able to coexist extremely peacefully, not really any carcass conflict, not much fighting. That being said, if a wolf pack catches a lynx out in the open, it's probably not good news for the lynx. And to the same degree, if a lynx catches a wolf pup by itself unguarded, it's probably going to take the chance to eliminate that competition. But it's far more infrequent than I think a lot of people talk about when it comes to Eurasian lynx.
One of the things you should talk about is the activity levels of these animals. And from what I was finding, it seemed that oftentimes they're crepuscular, meaning that they are most active during dawn and dusk. But I guess during the, summer times when it starts to get warmer, and I think it was with a 10 degrees Celsius change in temperature, like increase, these animals would essentially become less active during the day. And so they'd be basically avoiding the heat of the sun, kind of just conserving their energy to hunt primarily, at dawn and dusk. And during the winter time, in some places, they actually are active mostly at dusk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And a lot of what you see on nature documentaries, right, they're mostly filming stuff during the day just because of technological limitations.
Yeah.
And so you end up seeing a lot of videos of these hunts occurring during the day when, especially for cats, that's a rarity. Most cats are predominantly hunting at night. They're way more successful at night because they can sneak up closer to prey. Cats see 6 times better than us at night. Whereas herbivores, even though, they have all right vision, pretty good vision, they don't have great night vision. And so you'll see images of cats being able to stalk way closer to prey during the night than they can during the day. And that really does help increase hunting success. And it's just not something that people are always exposed to because of how documentaries work, and they need a lot of that footage to occur during the day. So that also can give you kind of a warped perception for how the animal lives, how it hunts. These guys are territorial, solitary, just like most cats. The male is going to defend a territory, but that territory is going to overlap with that of several females. Female is going to raise her kittens for about a year, maybe a little bit longer than that, before they're independent. And the female kittens will probably find a territory close to or overlapping with their mother, while the males are going to disperse further out to try and find better mating opportunities, less closely related individuals. You want to avoid inbreeding, and animals know that. So males tend to disperse very far to try and get those better mating opportunities, fight rival males to hold a territory of their own.
And speaking of the territory, I found it really cool researching the Eurasian lynx that most of the sounds that they make to, kind of communicate with each other it's a really low sound that's often unheard by humans, especially. So They
This
kind of have
very
a
like
secretive sound to
low growl, like
themselves.
rumble that it
Yeah.
sounds very odd for sure. And even all four species make kind of similar calls with that. So I know that there's quite a few videos for bobcat and Canada lynx that are out there, and it sounds very alien. It's not what you'd expect a cat to make. But even then, they don't do it that frequently, and they are very, very quiet animals because they don't want to be bothered, and especially in Europe, they're used to so much human persecution because they used to be in a lot more of Europe than they are, even though they are doing well with it where they are now.
And that's an interesting point because, in a lot of movies where they have animals, like especially cats, they make them make a call like right when they're like attacking something. But realistically, that would completely spoil the hunt. So, a lynx isn't going to make a noise while it's hunting. It's going to be completely silent, stalking, moving very slow until it actually makes the kill.
Yeah, no, that's for all predators in general, right? It's like, why attack something when you can just like jump out of the bushes, look all like awesome and scary, roar to scare your prey off, and then attack? No, that's your food. You do not want them to have any sort of advantage whatsoever. You are going to be as quiet as possible. It's very rare for any carnivore to make lots of noise. I would say like the cursorial predators like wolves and wild dogs and hyenas, they make quite a bit of noise when they're struggling to bring prey down. But I feel like a lot of that is also just them communicating with each other rather than really trying to alert the prey to any sort of vocalizations. But yeah, a lot of that snarling, that roaring, it's great entertainment, but that is reserved for when you are trying to intimidate, when you're trying to deter an attack. It's not for when you are the one trying to attack, because you want as much element of surprise as you possibly can.
And another thing that I'm kind of noticed as I've changed it to, snowing currently, is the coat doesn't seem to change with, the weather, which obviously this is a video game, so, it's fine. But when I was looking online, it seemed like the coats of pretty much all the lynx species will change depending on the season. It'll become more like subdued and a little, I guess, duller would be a better way to say it. So
Yeah,
instead
but
of being as
the
like,
fur is also a lot thicker
yeah,
for
yeah,
winter protection, which is huge. And so the coat, even though it's a duller color, it's a lot more luxurious, and so
yeah,
that's why you have a lot of fur trapping for different lynx species in both North America and Europe for the fur trade. And I do like looking at carnivores in the winter and photographing them in the winter a bit more, because a lot of times in the summer, those coats, even though they could be a little bit brighter, they're pretty scraggly and
mhm.
sometimes a little mangy looking, especially when they're shedding patches of it in the spring. But yeah, I think, compared to something like a coyote or a wolf with a lynx, the winter coat is a bit more toned down in color, kind of like deer. White-tailed deer are pretty famous for having a very toned down brown in their winter coat. But yeah, so the Eurasian lynx is its current conservation listing globally is least concern. So that means that it's not really a conservation priority. In the places that we do have it, it's doing really well. We're not worried about it going extinct at all. It means that in some places you can have legal managed human harvest, which a lot of European countries do have for Eurasian lynx. Like in the Scandinavian countries, there is a hunting season for lynx. You do still have some poaching issues outside of that. A study I was reading in Sweden was noticing, human caused mortality in general is the highest mortality for lynx by far. But they were noticing not only were you seeing mortality during the winter, during the hunting season, but also during the fall, which is when it's hunting season for things like deer and moose. And a hunter would just be seeing a lynx while they're walking out in the woods trying to find a deer or a moose, and opportunistically take a shot at it and kill it. And so that's what we consider poaching, because it's an illegal take of an animal outside of the regulated system.
Yeah,
So,
and
so
building off
poaching isn't just this syndicate sort of stuff that you think about with Africa. It's any sort of taking of an animal illegally, whether that's killing it or even just taking it alive for the exotic pet trade. That is another thing with lynx.
Yeah. And building off that point, I think I was reading a similar study, and I believe it said that in places with hunting and I think it was like regulated hunting, and obviously poaching would occur in some instances as well. The population growth rate, I believe, dropped from 20% to 4%.
Which makes sense. I mean, human pressure does do a lot. And
Yeah.
the other thing too is that, people often talk about, population control with population control in predators. And a lot of that comes from the fact that, when we were making a lot of these systems, it was in areas that were predator free. And it's systems that we were using for herbivores that do need populations controlled, because if the population gets too high, they'll overgraze an area, and that leads to plant degradation. With predators, they're what we call a self-regulatory species. And as we've said, these are animals that hold territories. They have this spatial requirement. They're going to defend their territories from other members of their species. So when a population starts getting quote unquote too high, they're going to start attacking each other. And so there is this sort of regulation that they are doing themselves, with male lynx, attacking other lynx that are trying to take their territory. And you do have that component that the population is completely handling on its own. So it is kind of a false narrative when people talk about how we need to control predator numbers, because they're actually really, really good at doing it themselves. And when they do it, it is less negative on the greater social dynamics of that population, because a hunter can take out a territory holding male that might have been really important, and a bunch of young males just come in and they split that territory up, and you might actually even increase the density. I know that that's a very common thing with cougars, but I would imagine with other cats that sort of phenomenon can happen as well. But yeah, I guess to kind of talk about those conservation concerns, I guess we can talk a little bit about what is being done ongoing, because this is quite different from our couple of other episodes where we were dealing with an endangered species as well as a critically endangered subspecies. So Lane, you kind of want to talk about what is different with trying to conserve Eurasian lynx compared to the other species we've talked about?
Yeah, so one of the tactics that's being used is rewilding, and Rewilding Europe is one of the bigger organizations that's taking part in this practice in Europe. The executive director is Franz Scheppers, if I'm saying that right. But basically, what rewilding is, apart from just basic conservation, where you're just conserving the natural landscape, the natural habitat of these species, you're not really taking a hands-on approach. You're kind of trying to make things better for wild species out there. You're not doing anything directly with them, while rewilding works to really restore the lost species from the landscape, and also protecting habitat, but also reintroducing the native species that are key to that place. So some examples that Rewilding Europe has is some European bison and wild horses as tools to help restore grazing on the landscape. Rewilding Europe currently has, I was reading, I think 15 different landscapes that they're working on right now. And they're just working on a bunch of different animals. An example, one of the landscapes is the Iberian Highlands. And right now they're reintroducing scavengers on the landscape to help restore just the cleanup of the landscape, restore the natural processes of dead and decaying animals being cleaned up by other wild animals. Talking about the Iberian lynx, they're trying to help in that restoration process and conservation process there. And then they're also working on the grazing as well with the Kulan.
Yep. Yeah, and the great thing about Rewilding Europe is that it is a very international organization, and that they are trying to have a lot of collaboration between a ton of different European countries to protect a greater landscape and restore a greater amount of land, not just focusing on doing individual work in single countries. Because especially when you're talking about these larger mammals, human-made borders don't really matter. It's more about habitats and landscapes, and they need to be able to move freely between landscapes. So conservation really needs to start moving more in this area, especially in certain areas like in Europe, where you had bounties on Eurasian lynx for a very long time. Several countries, Eurasian lynx were extinct back in the 1800s. And so a great deal of effort to restore those areas. And if the area is restored and it has wild prey, helping move those predators in with reintroduction. So Rewilding Europe has also helped with several Eurasian lynx reintroductions, including in the Velebit Mountains in Croatia, I think also the Southern Carpathians, which is Romania and Bulgaria. And so they've been doing a lot, even with the Eurasian lynx, despite globally not being as big of a conservation concern as the Iberian lynx, recognizing that it is an important predator and that there are places that used to have Eurasian lynx, and they do need them back in order to have that balanced ecosystem, keep those herbivores in check, and make that landscape overall healthier and more biodiverse. So it's really great to see this kind of work being done within Europe, because I think a lot of people tend to say, oh, Europe doesn't really have that much wildlife. Oh, it's a very tame place. They don't have any biodiversity. But to see this group really working hard to do this, and they're even now at the point in some areas where you can go on a European safari. And
Yeah, it's just
for
about to
example,
mention that.
the Velebit Mountains in Croatia, you can get a safari to go there and see the lynx and the bears and the wolves and the chamois and everything like that. And I think that's fantastic. I think, that's something that I would love to do. And so really trying to advertise, hey, Europe has wildlife too. We can do this. And I think it's a great sign of hope that maybe that's something that we can start doing in the northeastern United States and in other parts of the world, really understanding the value of having wildlife on the landscape, and that there are other opportunities than just having this land degradation, or just saying, oh, it's gone. There's no way we're going to be able to reintroduce it. There's too much going on. And seeing this is great, because Eurasian lynx do get a lot of pushback from sheep ranchers. As we said, they hunt roe deer, they hunt chamois, they hunt young wild boar. Those are all sheep-sized animals. So the sheep industry, they don't want lynx there. That's a big thing we're seeing with efforts to bring them back to the UK and Ireland, which, they're islands that don't have any large predators left. The largest predator they have left is the golden eagle, which even still isn't doing great. So there are a lot of people that would really like to get Eurasian lynx back there, and they've found a couple of, maybe good spots in the Scottish Highlands that could start with reintroducing lynx. But at the end of the day, the sheep industry is really powerful in the UK and other parts of Europe, and you have to do a lot of forest restoration too, because as we said, lynx, they like that cover. Wolves are more comfortable in those open areas, but lynx like to have that forest cover. So you definitely have to also have some good forest restoration if you're going to be reintroducing Eurasian lynx.
Yeah, and kind of talking about that effort too, with the safaris and whatnot, and just kind of coming from my tourism background, that's another important piece is what Rewilding Europe seems to be doing, is working with the local communities in these places and really promoting a tourism industry that also helps with the sheep herder problem, because it introduces a new form of economy for that landscape instead of just relying on that one piece, which kind of creates conflict between the wildlife and the people there. So,
and of course, always with ranching, promoting new husbandry practices that help deal with predators, because we understand how predators hunt, and there are some simple easy adjustments that ranchers can make to coexist peacefully with predators with minimal conflict. And I think that that's just an important thing to understand. And even just as livestock, sheep are pretty vulnerable. I've worked in sheep country in Utah, and when you take an animal that is designed evolutionarily to be living on cliffs to avoid predators and you put it in the middle of this sunny open field, it's going to be very vulnerable. So you have to understand that and know that, okay, I have to take quite a lot of precautions if I'm going to be able to keep this animal safe on the landscape. Predators or no, they get killed by a lot of random stuff. They can get killed by crows even. Sheep are not that smart. So there's a lot you have to do with sheep. But here we have the kittens, which is they look pretty good. It's nice to see how they kind of have the faded spots that get darker over time, which is something that we more so see with lynx, whereas in some larger cats it's kind of the opposite. But they look great, and even like the ear tufts and everything, the proportionally larger head again is great on this. That's what we have in young cats. Paws are still a little bit small, but they're not like Canada lynx. Like Canada lynx have huge paws for staying on top of snow, whereas Eurasian lynx, they're a bit more of a generalist, so they don't have that. Even though they do live in some areas with deep snow, they don't have that super adaptation that the Eurasian lynx does for staying on top of snow without sinking.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the Eurasian lynx out of the baby animal looks the best out of the three that we've seen, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the eyes on the baby actually look better than the adult.
Yeah.
Like they look a lot like sharper and less cartoony.
Yeah.
And I like how the eyes don't like necessarily pop out, like the white markings around the eyes kind of can still hide them a little bit unless it's in the light.
Because you don't really have like super like white in like that's a very human thing to have like white in your pupil. Most other mammals don't really have that. So to have that be reflected in the model of the eye is very good. But yeah, I guess in terms of species that we do have in Planet Zoo that these guys would be overlapping with, we have red deer. Red deer is a potential prey item for them, as well as I think ibex are a bit too high elevation, but maybe if ibex do come down, that is another one which was added in the Europe pack, as well as fallow deer in some areas. You have some of the smaller carnivores like the European badger and the red fox that they will kill for competition as well as an opportunistic meal at times. And then for some of the larger competitors, you have the gray wolf, the snow leopard, as well as the Amur leopard and the Siberian tiger. I think that's about it.
Yeah, because I don't think we have a Eurasian brown bear, right?
No, we don't. We have brown bears, so you can use the grizzly bear, well, I guess the Himalayan brown bear they overlap with a little bit because they are in northern India and Nepal a little bit, so they would overlap with the Himalayan brown bear. But I think other than that, that's all that the Eurasian lynx overlaps with that's been added into the game so far. Which I think it's a great pick. I think it's good to give Europe some representation because sometimes Europe has like no representation in these types of games because people just write it off as not having a lot of large animals or that the large animals there are boring. And so I think that this is important to kind of show, hey, Europe's got some stuff too. They had a whole DLC for Europe, which I think was great. So do we want to take this to the tier list now?
Sure.
Okay, so where is the lynx? It's right here. All right, Lane, where do you want to put the lynx? What's your gut telling you on it?
I was probably going to say probably A again or even S, but I'll probably stick
Any
with
particular
A.
reasons why?
I think it's pretty good. I hate to put another one in A, but yeah, just like what you were mentioning with the face structures and everything else, I thought they did a pretty good job. The coloring is good, and there's a couple things that could be worked on, but I thought it was pretty good for the most part.
Yep. Justin?
I would also have to agree with putting in A. I think the model is really good. I think it gets the hair tufts on the side pretty well, as well as with the tufts on the ears. Because it seems like with the Iberian lynx, the tufts are a lot more vertical.
Yes, they are.
Than with other lynx species. So it's cool that they captured that. And also just the kitten looks really good. Like the face of the kitten looks great. The movements look great. I like how they gave the kitten some kind of play behaviors and movements and stuff. So that's really cool.
Mhm.
So, and the coloration. I think the coloration was spot on for, a summer coat.
Yeah.
So
No,
I
I think that this like kind of like bright reddish brown is usually what you think about for the Eurasian lynx. And even though they do have some other gray browns and dark browns, like the reddish brown is usually what comes to mind when people picture it. So I think it was a great choice in that regard. I think I'm also gonna go with A tier, but it's almost S tier for me, honestly. I think it's a better looking cat than the Amur leopard. Maybe even the best looking cat in the game. I need to look at the caracal again because I think that might be the only other one that I think looks better, but I think it's a great pick for European exhibits as well. Just like it's a nice looking species to represent Europe. So if you're doing that kind of like temperate European exhibit, it's a great carnivore to put in there that looks really nice in any zoo that you're sort of working on. So personally, I would put it above both the Okapi and the Amur leopard. I don't know if either of you oppose that at all.
I agree.
I would agree too.
All right, so that is what we're at right now. It's not a lot of variety, but maybe we'll get some of the earlier ones that we know don't look as good that we're gonna complain about. But we'll have to find that out by spinning the wheel. So I guess the disclaimer before I spin is I did add the arid pack species into the wheel. At the time that we are recording this, the arid pack has not come out yet, but it's coming out in 2 days. So we will have time to do an arid pack species by next time because these come out bi-weekly. So I added them in, and who knows, maybe we'll get one of those, maybe we won't. But are you ready to spin the wheel?
Let's do it.
We got another European carnivore. Looks like it's not that much you have to add, Justin.
Yeah.
Just throw it right back in there, honestly.
Yeah.
make some fields, some edge habitat, but
Yeah.
all right.
Nice. That'll be a fun one.
Yeah.
Especially because I think it has a lot of coat variation.
Yeah, there's gonna be all the coat color variation, the geographic variation. I mean, this guy's very adaptive, and people know this one pretty well. So,
oh yeah.
All right. Well, now you know what to look forward for our next episode. So, we're the Wildlife Wire, and signing off.
See you next time.
Yeah.